Sit, talk to me, damn it, or else I'm gonna throw you in the fire!
You stupid bitch, you filthy... Flyover State of Fear. Welcome back to Flyover State of Fear. You got Brian, myself, and we are here to talk about Shutter Island today. But before we get into any of that, how is you, Brian?
Ooh, man, I'm doing good. I'm happy to be back. I always love when we have a guest, but man, I love just sitting down to chat with my buddy too.
Yes.
Speaking of buddies, we got to shout out our band, TJ. He got engaged last night.
Yeah,
congratulations to him.
Go congratulate the original Flyboy.
Fiance, Amory.
Yeah.
She's a lovely, lovely lady who was very kind and tolerant of TJ.
Yes, that's a big thing. Be tolerant of TJ, as you know, if you're listening and a Twitter follower or real life is nicer. So very cool.
It's funny. I don't want to be lame, but not that I knew. I mean, when he was going to propose or anything, but I had been thinking just like that day. I was reminiscing about the trip up for your wedding, and I was like, oh, what a great day I had with those guys. And then we got to go to Joe's nice wedding at the end. That was so fun. And then I was just like, oh, gee whiz. I was like, oh God, all right, calm down there.
Yeah. Now we have another one. Now we have another one.
Now we'll have to do it again.
Yeah. So make that sooner than later, TJ. All right.
I gotta get my credit card ready.
Ooh, 2 trips to Texas in a couple of years. All right.
Get it going.
Brian, as per usual, before we do dive into Shutter Island, have you caught any horror since the last time we recorded, or anything watched that you want to shout out? And I have a couple things.
I have 2 things I want to talk about real quick. First is a recommendation. It's on Hulu. It's a movie called Duel with Karen Gillan. Gillian? Is it Gillan? It's Gillan.
I say Gillan.
I think it's Gillan. Gillan.
Yeah, I love her.
Anyway, she's Nebula in the Guardians movies. She's great. I really like her a lot. She's in a movie. It's Duel, D-U-A-L, Duel. And it's by the same director of The Art of Self-Defense, if you ever saw that. A movie that I liked but didn't love, mostly because I'm just not a big Jesse Eisenberg guy, but it's very much in that vein of pitch black comedy bordering on kind of dramedy thriller. It's a hard movie to describe, but it was very good.
Duel with Karen Gillan. Yeah, she nails comedic so well too.
Yeah.
And
she's funny in a very deadpan kind of way, much like Nebula is. She's got that. Aaron Paul's also in it.
Because she had I didn't watch it, a very, very short-lived sitcom that was unfortunately had a bad name, so it died. I think it was Selfie.
Selfie, was that
it?
I used to, what, I have to say, I with not knowing anything about it, I remember mocking that name concept at the time.
Everyone did.
Hearing later that it was a little more elevated than the trailers made it seem.
I remember.
It's I'm sorry that they mismanaged your show so badly.
And it makes sense because you watch something I'll move on to the next movie in this, but you watch something like her in Jumanji, and she's so charming, where I'm like, that now kind of makes sense. And I think she was on a Doctor Who for a while. Anyway, I will check out Duel. That sounds right up my alley. Speaking of horror comedy, it's not as deadpan. I saw The Blackening.
I want to see that. It looks really good.
It's a straightforward comedy. I mean, it's horror.
Right.
It's even more comedy than horror than something like The Final Girls, but they're of the similar ilk, where it's not 100% a spoof movie or parody, but it's
self-aware to the point of almost.
Yeah. There's a couple really, really great jokes in the first scene alone that are so tongue-in-cheek, and if you know the reference and things are going oh, we know what movie we're in for.
Yeah.
There's gonna be no surprise in here. Had a great time with that movie. So just see it. I'm sure by the time this recording is out, it's probably available on VOD somewhere.
Right? I
Uh,
hopefully for free
yeah.
on the channel that I have.
There's ways.
Because there's always ways. I don't watch a movie on a laptop, Joe. I have class. Okay.
Yeah, it's called
I don't do it.
casting it to your TV or like plugging
All
it
right, you
online.
kids and your cat. There's that thing that always comes up and asks me if I want to do that. I don't want to do
No,
that.
no, you don't cast it because it'll never. It's always lag. But like just a hard line to HDMI, you keep it. I literally have an input on my TV that's I call a drop line.
I gotcha. My laptop does not have an HDMI port though.
Got to get a dongle.
I know.
We got to get these things.
No.
I don't
Everything's
know
a new thing though. And then you
yeah.
gotta put the thing somewhere when you're not using it. It's a pain in the
Oh,
ass.
it's all junk.
It's just all
It's all
junk.
junk. It's like how I bought gaming headphones not for $150, but went to Big Lots for for $20 for 20, and I think they work just as fine.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with those. My first pair of gaming headphones that I ever bought was the same type of thing. It was like on the clearance rack at Walmart. They were like, $20 or something, and they had the orange tag on them. The box was all beat to shit, but unopened, just like it had been around.
But they work just as good.
Hell yeah, they were good. They worked so good that they didn't die till Harrison had used them for like 2 years. So
Yeah, that makes sense. He probably like jammed them up with like.
yeah. Well, he just kids, they just take them off and throw them on the ground.
Me, on the other hand, I just got a PS4 and its flaws. It's a white controller, so all your dead skin marks are on it. So I bought like basically a condom for it because I was so sick of cleaning it every day.
I went the other way. I got a replacement for my Nintendo Wii, which has been busted for a long
Oh
time,
yeah.
and I got a black one this time.
Smart. Ours
Black
is red.
controllers too.
Oh yeah, ours is red and we have the Mario are red and green for the Wii.
Nice.
But I get it. It was like PlayStation. What the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
Literally every day I'm like, I do it right now. I'm like, you can see All right. The other movie, real quick, before we do Shutter Island, I did want to say, and we were kind of joking about it before, I did catch like majority of Annabelle Creation, and I know it's not great, but it is a fine studio horror that has some decent scares.
I can't endorse this movie with you. We're gonna have to separate on this one. It's fine though. I never will tell you not to enjoy your very bad movie. I'm gonna end because I'm gonna do one more one more watch, and because we're watching the world's saddest movie today in Shutter Island, I want to bring up another tragedy. They did find the remains of Julian Sands.
Yes, very sad.
Actor. He went missing on a hiking trip in California. He presumed dead, obviously. It's sad, but also at least his family now has some closure. They know what happened. They can grieve properly. But I watched in his tribute a 1989 classic, Warlock.
See the poster.
Yeah, the poster is the most iconic thing. The white background and him standing there, all he's got the big shadow that looks like a demon. And it's what? Honestly, I think I had seen it before, probably like years ago. I didn't remember much about it, and I was pleasantly surprised.
What's like the ilk of the movie? Like, what's like a similar gist of Warlock?
It's hard to say. He's an ancient guy. I guess maybe something like Critters or Buffy the Vampire.
Okay, that's kind of the vibe. I'm just curious, but because it's kind of the vibe the poster
little less comedic. But you got Richard E. Grant in it as like a guy from medieval times who is chasing him, and they both end up in the present day. And he's trying to find three MacGuffins and put them together and become the devil's only son or whatever. But either way, he's great in it. There's some really fun flying effect. He does some real good wire work when he's like doing some of his flying, which I thought was like a fun flourish that they probably didn't do. There's some cool like details about him as a witch, because he like the movie's called Warlock, but you can tell it's because like the studio was insecure because he refers to himself as a witch all the time, which I thought was cool. Like it's not a man woman thing. I'm a witch. I do magic. Like which Harry Potter obviously normalized later in the witches and wizard thing,
but even then, like Warlock,
yeah.
The only one though, I think this is so of just my generation that I can think of that does like the divided line of like Warlock, witch, is in Halloween Town. the
Oh
Disney
yeah.
Channel. Anyway, I got to
That's
check out
the
Warlock
girl
though.
boy stuff. We're all about supporting genders, except when it comes to witches and warlocks. That is severe. That's still
That is
strictly gender.
separate, and there's only one look for each too.
Right. I did
Um,
like Street Sands in this one, always with the bare feet. It's like that earth thing that that I like that. I liked
I gotta
his
check that
witch.
out. I gotta check that movie out then.
It was fun, and it was on Freevee or one of those channels. So I had to watch a few commercials, but no big deal.
I've been encouraging so many people to use Tubi as of recent.
Ooh, Tubi rips. Also, I cannot highly recommend. I highly recommend Canopy. If you have a library card, you can get Canopy, and you get
Mhm.
like 7 free watches a month. Plus, they have a whole section of kids stuff that is always
Mm,
free. It's great. It's really good.
Canopy, yeah. That
They got a really good selection because it's through the library, so a lot of like artsy stuff. If
don't
you're a
they have
nerd,
access to a lot of Criterion
yeah,
streams
and
too
like
with that?
they used to have all the A24s, like even the
That's
Hollywood
what it was.
stream
That's what it
stuff.
was. The
Yeah,
A24. That was the big connect. Yeah, no, there's some fucking great apps out there. I mean, with leading into Shutter Island, it is so back to back. I just watched one fake heady movie and one really well made heady movie, and the one was for work. As you know, I watched The Da Vinci Code. Could not get into it slightly, but I won't divide. But that was a Tubi watch too,
that's
which have
that is a relic of like that movie could only exist in like 2006. You know what I mean? It just
I
had to come out in that
I
perfect
wish
window.
I wish like one of you or the Flyboys were there for me to like lead this discussion because most people were like, "Yeah, I like to," they and also just being polite, and I'm just like, "I'm trying here, guys. I couldn't get into it, and I can't think of anything." But fun discussion with them and all that stuff. But doing Da Vinci basically back to back with Shutter Island is like one's a fake thinker where it was just exposition dump, and
Okay.
Shutter Island's like a real thinker where we're about to go into it.
Yeah, like Shutter Island's a legit mind bender, and honestly, we can use that to segue into the first thing I kind of want to talk about
Please, yeah.
before we even get into the movie is the the perception and the reception of Shutter Island. Like they both had an effect on each other, and I think that's the problem. I think to this day, most people dismiss Shutter Island as what I would call a
I
twist movie.
It's a twist movie, or it was that, and I the only time I saw this movie, maybe I've watched it once since, was in the theaters, and it was also sold as such a heavy horror movie when
Yeah,
it's a thriller, it's a mystery thriller,
it's more of
but
a mystery
it
suspense
was sold
thriller.
with
The
like
horror elements are toned down.
it was sold with the woman shushing
Yeah, with
and
the
Ben Kingsley singing, "She just evaporated in the wall," and
yeah.
like that was watching this trailers came back, and like I think that's part of its
Yeah, I think it
reception
was
too.
I agree. I think it was mismarketed. I think it got labeled as a twist movie when I would argue that it's a more of a reveal movie that then begs further viewing to like really delve into it, which is
Yeah,
like I'm glad.
it's weird. Like Leo also in the same year has Inception come out and Shutter Island, and both are twist movies and like thinkers.
Sure.
But Shutter Island, I don't know. I mean, everyone's really good in this movie, and so is he.
And it's Scorsese.
Yeah,
It's
I
Scorsese
think.
basically doing his version of The Shining. Like every time I watch
Ooh,
this movie, I cannot help how Kubricky and shiningy
well,
it feels with the music swells and like
it's. I mean, it's part of
the
the.
kind of like the like go like the kind of like bending of real what's real and what's not and what is what
Well,
you're seeing there and is it not. I've thought
well,
it I've
I
always
like
thought
I
it.
like that you bring up the music part of that because that is one of the things I did read was it was supposed to be a mimic to The Shining for that, and it's Scorsese, so he's using you know Hitchcock references, and then a movie I've never seen, but it's a big it pulls a lot from a movie Dana Andrews' character in Laura, Not My Wife, which is like 40s movie, I believe, or a 60s movie, and then a low budget 1940s zombie movie. That I don't even know the name for, but like it's a similar plot, and like Scorsese having his deep film knowledge put that Prince and made it his own still. From a cultural standpoint, though, too, this reminds me also a lot of perception-wise, not horror-wise, and not because Mark Ruffalo's in it, of like my favorite movie, and one of your favorite movies is Zodiac.
Oh, absolutely.
It's similar to the Zodiac release, where it's like this fantastic movie. I'm not saying it's as good as Zodiac,
Yeah.
but it's
Oh,
released.
we can put our cards on the table. I love Shutter Island.
Yeah, Shutter Island's great.
So I
It's
mean,
released.
I-
It's released in February. I think Zodiac was released in March. It's
and
hyped
also
up.
this is early. This is like people might not realize that it's only been for the last couple of years. It used to be the first 2 or 3 months of the year were like a wasteland.
Yeah,
It's where January, February, March is where movies got dumped.
it's hyped. It's
It's
hyped.
only since like I don't know, maybe the last 10 years or less.
Yeah, it's hyped up as a as more of a horror. Both movies, but watch the trailer for both. Blah blah blah. They come out and then like they have a critical reception.
Yeah.
I mean, this less than Zodiac, but they have more of a critical. But from an audience, it's not what they were thinking or wanted. So okay, and they moved on, and then down the line, it was, oh, I saw that at a crazy twist.
Mhm.
So for me, that's like such a parallel there. It is funny you also mentioned the year of the dump. So in reading some of the trivia, who produces Paramount, I think. They
Okay.
one of the studios only had the budget to put two basically awards pushes out.
Oh
So
yeah.
and they decided this wasn't worth its award push, which turns out to be the only Leo Scorsese movie not to have any noms in any
Yeah.
standpoint. And they pushed like two others. I didn't write that fact down, but it was the other one I
Doesn't
did.
matter. Lesser movies, I'm sure.
One of them was, and I'm sure if I looked at it, it was like, oh, yeah, that.
Well, we talked about a little off mic. I think what we should do here, so that we can properly like go through this, is just real quick up top. I'll do a basic overview, and we can kind of like we'll talk. We'll spoil. We'll basically do a spoiler review,
Yeah.
spoiler chat, and then we can delve a little deeper into certain scenes and walk through the plot a little bit more. But that way, we can come at it from all sides. So, movie opens with Teddy Daniels. He's a U.S. Marshal. He's with his new partner. This is their first case together. They're going to an island prison. It's an island for the criminally insane. It's off the coast of Boston, I believe. Excuse me. They get there. They're introduced to the case, which is a missing woman. Basically, just disappeared off the island. They're doing their investigation, but in the midst of their investigation, you come to find out that Teddy also believes that this is a place that holds a person that he believes is responsible for the death of his family. His family died in a fire. He thinks this guy set the fire. He thinks he's here, and also maybe they do Nazi experiments here.
And he's a World War II veteran.
He's a World War II vet, so he thinks that this place also maybe does Nazi experiments.
Mm.
So through the course of the mystery, we're like I said, we can delve deeper into it in a little bit, but we're seeing a lot of different clues, and Teddy's like piecing things together, and he's meeting patients, and he's interviewing people, and he's finding clues and whatever, all to what he believes is find where this lighthouse where they're lobotomizing patients and doing experiments, and where he thinks his partner Mark Ruffalo, who has disappeared by this point in the movie, is being held.
And he thought he saw him die, but his body wasn't there.
Right, he thought he fell off a cliff, but then the body was missing. He's obviously, we're at the 2-hour mark of a Scorsese movie. Our protagonist is frayed. He breaks in to the final room, and it is revealed by Ben Kingsley, who is the head of the institute, that he himself has actually been a patient this whole time, and this has all been an elaborate ruse by his doctor and the staff to help him come to terms with why he's there and what happened to him and his family. And I think that's part of the thing too, is people were dismissive of this because I think from the first trailer there were people who would just instantly like, oh, he's an inmate at the thing. That's going to be the twist. And that's very much is the twist, but there's so much more to it, to what's
There's
going
so
on
much
with
to it.
right, with
And
what's going on with his character and why and what happened to him and what they're doing. It's so much more in depth than
and
that. But like because they were technically right, I think a lot of people cast this
and it's
off.
a lot like Ruffalo's character to more on him too, to doing this to be like, we don't need to be lobotomizing these people.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I didn't want to delve too deeply into it, but there's a undercurrent, and this is all taking place in the 50s, and there's supposedly a push pull. Ben Kingsley discusses a push pull between like old school lobotomizing and a newer like kind of pharmacology and therapy. They're
Hmm.
trying these new things. Um, so is that? Do you think that that's
I think
enough?
that really I think that really covers it. I think you did a sweeping of the just the bullet points of the plot.
Yeah,
Um,
and we can get into as much
but
detail
what
now as you like without
which which funny, I've had this movie since its release, but I'm sure this is one of the rare movies that I've inadvertently not stole. Someone left at my place or lent me in college and never returned. Um, but watching this, when you watch this, one of those ones you watch knowing the twist, it does add to it so much more because
a lot.
watch all the other characters. Like the orderlies are always around. Mark Ruffalo is also like terrified to make any true decision.
Well, even you'll notice Leo will comment on it. He's like, "Oh, your guys are all on edge here.
Hmm.
Like, why is everybody so so nervous
Hey,
and all the patients are are like,
that one doctor that he sedates and in the shoulder
oh, the
at the
Max
end
von
of
Sydow.
yeah, Max von Sydow's guy. I like watching it too. He's not being a prick to be a prick because it's the cop. He's being like, this isn't gonna work.
Yeah, he's pushing it because he thinks it's kind of silly.
Yeah,
He's
because
he's like he's playing along, but just barely. Like at any moment he would bail on this.
it is. I mean,
Oh,
uh,
well, there's the whole scene where Leo breaks into that meeting, and it's like obviously a meeting of actual like the board of the prison,
mhm,
and they all tacitly kind of know about this experiment that's going on,
mhm.
and he's like talking about the case all seriously, and one of the guys leans over, he's like, "Oh, the case of fours or whatever," because it's like a plot point that they all talked about, that they all knew
Yeah,
about. That's like part of the gimmick, and he's like, "They're." And so it's funny to like pick up on stuff like that
it's
more and more the more you watch it.
it's so clever, and especially how like Scorsese, directing it, putting it together, puts us to spend so much time too in his dreams settlement and like mixing it in as oh well, he was just a bad dude in the war and saw some shit in Auschwitz.
Yeah.
So as audience members, we're pretty trained to be like, oh well, I have sympathy for him and it's PTSD and like he's barely keeping it together. But this might be the most a top five unreliable narrator movie that
Oh, it's
doesn't let
insane.
up.
Well, that's what I was going to tell you. I wanted to maybe take a second and just lay out what Edward Daniels, Leo, the U.S. Marshal, who he thinks he is, what that story is compared to what really happened.
Yeah,
Just
let's
briefly, just real brief.
because
I'll try to keep it very brief.
no, there's a huge difference. One thing before you kind of we give the
Well, there's
differences.
elements that tie in,
There's
and I guess we should talk a little bit about the case that they make up for him, because the
yeah.
case they make up for him is meant to emulate things that are in his real story to
Hmm.
kind of draw that out.
Oh,
And
and there's things that people are wearing to help
yeah,
trigger his thought. It's very clever and fleshed out of what it needs to be done.
if you think about the effort that Mark Ruffalo as the Doctor and Ben Kingsley as the director put into this, it's crazy. Like that they would do all this for one guy to try to help one patient is insane.
nuts.
They would just they put a spike in this guy's brain and they throw him in a cell.
My Letterboxd review was, I gave it 4 stars, but it was written by Nathan Fielder. Just like
We're just playing around here.
it's insane. But like yeah, I'll get in. We'll talk about like the little details. But the audience perspective too is like the lazy version of this would want you to also keep thinking, well, maybe he is right, and it's a deeper conspiracy,
Right.
and it completely like because that's one like lazy way I think you could take this. Like,
Well, you could just
oh,
see it
Leo's our guy.
it is what it is. Like, and then at the very last minute, at the end of the movie, when he breaks in the lighthouse, it is a crazy Nazi experiment.
Yeah.
He shoots up the place, and it saves Mark Ruffalo, and that could
they
be the end.
throw that out the window because Ben Kingsley's sitting in that lighthouse, like not Morpheus, like the fucking person in the Matrix with all the
architect,
TV, the architect.
old guy, yeah.
It's the same scene.
Only he's got a whiteboard instead of a bunch of TVs.
Yeah. But Brian, go like
he was like, I don't want to haul a bunch of shit up the stairs, so like a whiteboard.
It's pretty heavy in this day. We could get
phone,
like one of them.
Make sure the phone's hooked up so I can call down. Okay.
But yeah, give us the difference between the two characters or the two Leo characters.
So I talked a little bit about Edward Daniels, the U.S. Marshal, in my original plot synopsis. His family was killed in a fire. He believes Andrew Latis is the man who set the fire. He believes Andrew Latis is in the prison. He also believes there's another guy who was experimented on by the Nazis who is there also, perhaps. Yes. And he does meet up with that guy who ends up just being another paranoid schizophrenic.
It was a guy he just kicked the shit out of.
Right. Well, they're just feeding off each other. There's two crazy guys feeding off of each other. Yeah. And but anyway, that's kind of what he thinks happened. In reality, the fire was set by his wife, who is Michelle Williams.
Mm-hmm.
She basically, Andrew Latis is Edward Daniels' real name. He comes back from the war, but he's all fucked up. He saw some shit, and he's all fucked up. And they do a good job of like, Scorsese puts a little Schindler's List in this, and he uses the creepy imagery. It's not hard to pull creepy imagery from Holocaust shit,
No, like it's but it's of the time, and it's not tasteless.
More than the corpse piles, I enjoy the part with the officer where he's they're going through the office and the officer botches. That's all pretty good. Mm-hmm. But anyway, saw some shit. He's neglecting his wife, and his wife is schizophrenic. She tries to kill herself by burning down their apartment. It doesn't work. And after that happens, she tells him that she has a bug in her brain. And so basically telling him that she is insane. Like, yeah. I am sick, but he doesn't do anything about it. He basically gets him a house in the country, drinks and ignores it, and works all the time. He is a U.S. Marshal, so he just goes off on cases and leaves her home alone with the kids. They have 3 kids. Well, things progress because she goes untreated, and she ends up killing their children, drowning them.
Taking them to school.
Yeah, which is part of what they put in the fake story for the missing woman that he's supposed to be there. They put that she's like, there's the little details they take from his real history to try to draw that out of him. And
my favorite little detail that's added to that is when we catch the first Rachel, right? Who the missing woman, the fake woman,
the one who's the nurse, who's like always acting.
Yeah. The Emily Mortimer, who just
by the way, how lucky to have a nurse who's such a good actress.
It's like fucking Emily Mortimer. I mean, like I was like, this woman she just cleaned up in the 2000s. That actress. But my favorite little detail is too, she's wearing the same sweater. They gave her the same sweater that his wife wore to help trigger that. And it's such
because
this little
Ben Kingsley knows all the details of the story, so it's easy to like. They gave him. He's got the tie. They have him dressed. The clothes they give at Teddy Daniels is the tie and the one she gave him and everything. But so when he comes home and finds the kids dead and finds her, he kills his wife, and the trauma of all that basically makes it so that he has a break with reality. So when he gets put in this institute for the criminally insane, He doesn't ever acknowledge that he's in prison. He always treats it like a case. He's always a detective. Everybody around him is part of it. They're either the cop, they all. He's they have their jobs there, but he's just there to investigate this case or whatever. So the idea is they play it out in hopes of breaking him and like getting to acknowledge reality by showing it to him and all that.
Yeah, I mean, the end quote sums right his whole thought process
Yeah,
of.
we can talk about the ending because the
Oh,
ending's
no, no,
really
no, no,
perfect.
I'll
So we can
save.
hold off.
We'll hold. But what you just of his thought, it sums up
Yeah,
everything you just went through. And yeah, but you're following this case, thinking, okay, he is here to fuck this fucked up situation, and like there's a little bit of like a Wicker Man involved in this too,
right. 'Cause
of
it's a
just
weird. Well,
like
you're in a weird place. I mean, it's a very
of
unnatural
I'm on an
place.
island, I'm isolated, and everyone keeps also telling him at a certain point, well, maybe you kind of figuring this thing out. Like Chuck Mark Ruffalo goes, maybe they're onto you. Maybe they don't want because they want him to think who he's.
They're trying to get him to play out his delusion to its end, to
Mhm.
like prove to him that there is nothing to find. The idea is that if he can complete this mission that he's on, that he'll get. But as we see through the movie, I think they do a good job of illustrating this. Every time he gets close to something, he adds a new layer. You know what I mean? He himself brings in. They're starting to wrap up the thing about Rachel Solando. Oh, well,
Mhm.
she's here. The girl's back. It's over.
Whatever.
Oh, now I'm looking for Andrew Latus. Oh, and now it's the guy, the Nazi
Whoops.
guy, George, whatever. That I got to find him.
They're
And
here.
yeah, they're here. So like he always finds a way to not allow it to end, and they're trying to force him to the final, to the actual finale of it.
His delusion is vast. It just.
Well, it's honestly what it made me think of is present day what we deal with conspiracy theorists all the time online.
Oh
There's
yeah.
always a next level. If you prove something to them, if you're like, you know, vaccines cause autism. Well, no, they are. Here's all the scientific data. Oh yeah, well, who paid for the scientific data? There's always another level to take it to, so that you don't have to believe
Mhm.
any. And that's what he does.
Here's the recording of the recent from. Well, what papers was he actually shuffling?
Yeah,
You know.
there's always some plausible deniability. There's always another lie
No,
to pile on.
that's a good parallel to that because like I there's probably part of that being this metaphor for conspiracy, but there's also like mental health and suppressing your demons is
Well,
the
the
big
things Ben
forefront.
Kingsley's talking about are true. I mean, exposure therapy is a thing. Like they do this. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
We do treat people by like having them work through things more now and stuff.
It is, yeah. I mean, it's a movie without it's a movie really without any of its villains. Even Ted, even Ted Levine
I love Ted Levine. Ted
is
Levine's in one scene, and he is awesome.
he's in
He's
it.
so
He's in
funny.
three.
But like, he's really
They're
only
in one.
one. Like
But
he only has like real dialogue
but
in
they
it.
shoot him as a villain to be like, because you can see just Ted Levine be like, why don't we just fucking put the pick through his head?
Right, because I guess in a way he's a villain of this story in that he represents the end, the bad ending. Like he represents like the least desirable scenario,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, cast. I mean, part of the I could
I mean,
gushing about the
easy for
cast.
Scorsese to get a cast. Anybody he wants.
Yeah,
You know what I
he's
mean?
Martin Scorsese. Mark Ruffalo sent him how he's in this movie. He sent him a fan letter, and basically just said, "Hey, I here's my work. I would love to work with you. Blah blah blah." I know Scorsese
Really
can't. This is post Zodiac too. It's not like 13 going on 30. Mark Ruffalo
Oh,
and Scorsese cast him
he's
as the
1 year
second
away
lead.
from being the Hulk in this movie.
Yeah,
He's
and
probably already cast when he's in on set for this.
is he? Oh yeah, yeah. Edward Norton's already out. Uh,
2012. This is 2011, right? In 2012 is
10, it's
Avengers.
10.
10. Close though,
It's
so close. Those
close.
Avengers movies take a long time to make.
But that's fine. He can. I mean, like, and the brilliance of so there's that scene where Leo climbs down the rock. I mean, that's really, to me, that's like the true like grandeur of when now we're in full insanity.
When he
When
goes into the cave.
Mark Ruffalo leaves and he climbs down to the rock, and it's of like intensity and scariness. Probably that is the biggest scene for me. With all the rats, and it's
Oh
just
yeah.
like, I mean, the rats are fucking. They're mice. They were rats, and they
But
were
I love the way they
horrifying.
come out of nowhere and they're just instantly covering everything.
They're an infestation, and he has to
And
climb.
this is the point in the movie where you're like, especially when you're watching the second time, is were there any rats at all?
I was
Like,
wondering that too. I'm
are
like,
the rats even there?
I don't think they were,
I don't think they
because
were. I think it's his mind driving him towards that cave so he can have basically a mental break where he meets with the real Rachel,
so
who is literally only a delusion. She
what's
cannot
amazing
exist.
about the real Rachel is, I mean, you'd believe that I mean, it's a little ridiculous she'd be hiding on a cave, but you believe she was real if you're believing this. I'm on the lam from the crazy U.S. experiments.
Like everything, like it all feeds whenever it's something like him alone, it always feeds directly into his narrative
And what
because
I,
he's creating it, so it's always gonna like yes and whatever he wants
yeah,
to happen.
and what I love about that too is the Rachel too. It's Patricia Clarkson, and they made her and Emily Mortimer look so similar to
They
each
do look
other.
similar. Yeah, she looks like
Uh,
a little bit older and a
just a
little bit
little older,
worked outy, just like, but like
just,
yeah,
just a
but like
little.
if you were gonna make a movie about Patricia, you cast Emily Moore. You know what I mean? Like
Yes,
they do it almost perfect.
and she talks, and she's at such a they never get close to each other too. If you notice, it's a
Yeah.
far away distance, and the big thing they keep focusing on is fire, because thinking is burning the fire, and the cigarettes. And she's like, well, you didn't smoke their cigarettes, did you?
Oh yeah,
You
then
didn't
it's the
drink their
paranoia
coffee.
sets in, and
You
you've been
didn't.
eating their food, and you've been drinking, and they give you pills for your headache, and they,
Yeah.
what I mean?
And I mean, like,
I
in
am
the
always amazed at that though in any horror movie where people like immediately sit down and start eating and drinking something that somebody offers them in any situation where it's like even the least bit kind of like sketchy. I've been watching a movie. I was like, I know you didn't just like get served a drink and just drink.
like, if your car broke down on the side of the road and the only thing
Yeah.
around was like a creepy house, like in real life, you'd knock and like feel them out, but you'd be like, no, thank you to any of, like,
Right.
do you want water, man? Like, nah, I'm
I
just waiting
mean,
for
if
the
you have a
tow.
sealed water bottle,
Can I
maybe.
see you crack it open though?
And also, I'm gonna need to squeeze it and make sure no like pinholes shoot water out of the side where you've like stuck a syringe in it or something.
um, but yeah, there's so many little details. I mean, from the fact that Mark Ruffalo too, like, doesn't know how to holster his gun because he's not actually a fucking cop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but but yeah, back to the cave. Like, that's the big turn, right? Then he's out. Then he gets back to shore, or back to the high ground, and that's when Ted Levine finds him. He's like, "All right, we'll take you back. It's
And
fine."
Ted Levine is even more than Max von Sydow is breaking the veil. Like he's almost kind of not acknowledging it at
Yeah,
all. He's just like, I love. He's just the whole thing about like we're men of violence, and that's
violence.
yeah,
Because I do think it's one of those experiments where, like, I don't know, at any job, when someone like is doing something that you're like, yeah, I don't, yeah, no, they want to use the copier, no one does, like, and
right,
it's
right.
like, oh, you're not excited, and
You're gonna try something, and he's kind of
you're
like off to the side, like,
you're not
okay.
excited, and you're like, yeah, it's nice. Like me with my movie club at work the other week, like, yeah, that's fine. We'll let Joe do his thing, but yeah, sure. Anyway, it's that's his vibe of, like, the violence, the fucking vibe. Well,
Basically, he's me with any activity.
yeah.
I'm off to the side, like, a little skeptical about that.
So, and but they bring him back to the insane asylum, and Mark Ruffalo, Chuck, nowhere to be found, and he's trying to weasel his way from doctor to doctor, and who's a Max von Sydow is like, the room is that way, he's like, oh, the shore's that way, and
Yeah.
everyone just
It
keeps
blows up
telling,
Ben Kingsley's car.
yeah, oh, I love when Ben Kingsley is like, that's a nice car. It's like, I really
I
liked
love
that
that.
car. being like, we know you're, as you said, why this one guy? Like,
Well,
why
that's the
is
thing. Like, what's Ben Kingsley's supposed to say? He basically cost himself that car. He's the one who turned this maniac loose. The whole reason, like, they talk about it in the movie. They're like, "You're the most dangerous patient we have here."
because he doesn't believe it?
He's like, "You don't. You're trained. You're a trained killer. You are a soldier and then a cop. You hurt people. You can fuck up my guards. You don't believe anything. You don't trust anybody. You're sketchy all the time. You turn on a dime. You fly off the handle about everything.
Well,
Like." What's he say? He says to they're like, "What doesn't agitate you?
yeah,
Words, actions, like everything works you up."
well, it's shown in the God, blanking on his name, Rorschach, the fucking
Oh yeah, yeah. Jackie Earl Haley.
Jackie Earl Haley. It's shown in the Jackie Earl Haley thing how he's like, no, you beat the shit out of that guy. That's why he's there. He wasn't cut up by
Well,
by
he was
Lester,
beaten by Letus.
by
You're
Letus.
Andrew Letus.
Yes, and he was like, no, um I don't know. I think I think it's a good pick. You know, in the sense of like to what we've talked about. Um, it's definitely like it's in the genre, and it's one of those things where
Yeah,
like
I agree. Like, I've always thought of it as a horror movie, but it's definitely a horror. But like again, in the way that The Shining isn't full of horrific images or like jump scares, or but it's like it's definitely unsettling and like
it,
there's so much of Shutter Island that makes me uncomfortable and like upset. You
it's
know, I don't know.
upsetting. It's upsetting because it's it's
The
someone
subject
who
matter is incredibly grim.
it's someone who wants to do the right thing, thinking they do, but realistically, they're the cause of everything in their own delusion.
Well, and like I said, we can go ahead and I think we've talked enough. We can go ahead and segue into the final. So Teddy, Andrew Letus accepts reality. He like finally has a breakdown. He remembers everything. You see the scene where he finds his kids and he kills his wife. Um, we didn't talk about some of the dream imagery is incredible. When Michelle Williams turns around in the dream and her whole back is like burning charcoal.
Oh,
That's
it's
such a
beautiful.
that's an incredible image. She's looking out the window and there's kind of that purple orange sky and she's got the burning back. It's really great.
It's
We didn't
beautiful.
talk a lot about that. I mean, not much to say. He's Martin Scorsese, of course, but like this is probably more because of the like horror elements. There's a little bit more. I don't know, like what do I want to say here? He doesn't usually get this fantastical, right?
No,
Scorsese
this
doesn't
well, this
usually do
is
stuff like
this
this.
is a year before or 2 years before Scorsese does Hugo. I know, which is his kids
Right?
movie, but talking about it from a look from being fantastical to experimenting more with
Doing more fantasy or
yeah,
like non-reality based.
with like in shot and computer graphics. I mean, because if you want to see some of the best, I mean, I'm sure it's advanced now, but some of the best CG that's been put on camera, it's most of Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah, there's some
Um,
there.
you know,
I tell you what, there's a shot in this
and
one I just
Hugo's
love
beautiful too.
where the little girl walks up, it's actually right before he blows up the car, and she walks up and she like it's all slow, and they have the score is just like giving that one those, and they got it kind of resonates in your chest, and they take her hand and the car blows up around them and then the fire dissipates and they're just still standing there. It's like it's not like a revolutionary, but he's just such a master of like it just looks so good and it's paced like every shot is just so meticulous. His timing is just so good. You know what I mean?
He's, I
He's
mean,
Martin Scorsese.
he's Martin Scorsese, and this is one where um, I wish in Martin Scorsese's career we got a little more of horror movies because when he does them, I think he's such a fan of the genre. He's just a fan of film that he does them so well. Like Shutter Island and Cape Fear are the only two like
Yeah.
true blue horrors that he's
Well,
done.
he's such a master of controlling emotion and and as far as like tension and suspense, and that's such a big part of making a good horror movie that it stands to reason. Like most horror movies I've ever seen aren't as tense as the last scene of the last act of Goodfellas. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
like he knows how to get the emotion. He just hasn't done this type of thing.
yeah, he's fucking amazing.
But anyway,
Yeah.
we talk. I was finishing up. We're wrapping things up. So he does accept reality, right? And he's like, he understands why he's there, and they think it's gonna good. They're like, all right, sweet. And he sits down, and Mark Ruffalo sits down next to him. He's sitting outside on the hospital steps, and Mark Ruffalo sits down next to him. He's like, so what's going on, And he's like, so what's our next move, boss? And he's right back in it,
So there's two thoughts I had. First, like I said, it's been since the theater since I've really seen this. I thought from memory that it ended there, and it was like more of there wasn't as much of a play out. I thought it was like, what's our next move, boss? And the head shake, and then ends.
Yeah. I love the way he goes over Ben Kingsley, gives a little.
And at the same time, there's two ways to think of it, for me at least.
I want to hear this, because to me, I've always thought there's only one way to think of it.
Okay, so I think there's two ways to think of this. Is he didn't just say all that shit to get out of, the thing. That's the first way, right? He says all that stuff, what they want to hear.
And he still thinks he's Edward Daniels, and he's like, now we're back on the case,
But he trusts Chuck. But this is why this time I don't think it's that way. Because he already is so untrusting of Chuck. Why would he immediately trust Mark Ruffalo's character, who was working with the others, who was like, dude, I'm Dr. Lester. It was Lester. Yeah. I'm Dr. Sheen. I'm sorry, I'm so bad with the name.
That's it.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Lester. Blah, blah, blah. That's why I'm like, he just relapsed right into it because it was too much information for his fucking brain to handle.
Mm-hmm. See, to me, it's always been, and I've always felt very confident in this, that he is still fully in his right mind. That that they get through to him and it works. The treatment works. And he, in that moment, it's because of the line. It's when he stands up and he says to Mark Ruffalo, is it better to live knowing you're a monster, or to die thinking you're a good man? And to me, that's his way of like, and Mark Ruffalo even does a little pause there. He's saying he would rather take the lobotomy and go out thinking like he's basically decided he would rather lie to himself. It's like it's like Memento.
Yeah,
he'd rather trap himself in a loop of lies than realize the truth of his existence.
I think that character. I said there's two ways, right? It is a little ambiguous.
No. I purposely definitely left open.
I have a.
But to me, it always was pretty clear. I always felt like he's taken the easy way out. He would rather not think about this.
So he can't
forget what they told him, and he'd rather go back to the way things were. I think
that character has a little too much of a hubris to do so, but I do have a bit of a answer. Not answer, because no one's ever answered it, right? None of the.
Oh, they should.
Your Scorsese's, your
asking them.
Your Leos. But the onset, Dr. James Gilligan, the movie's onset psychiatric consultant, because remember it's Martin Scorsese, he's not doing anything half-ass, has a definitive answer. So he claims Teddy Daniels.
Just my monocle.
But it's your answer. He claims Teddy Daniels.
And he's right. In that case,
chose lobotomy because of his guilt over his past mistakes as Andrew Laddis. He chose lobotomy as a form of suicide, and he refused to remember himself as a monster. So it's literally what he said.
Pulse that didn't let him face his reality in the first place. You know what I mean? The same denial that has kept him as Teddy Daniels is the same. He's just like, it's just another version of that. So yeah. I take back my mockery. I now think this guy's a smart expert.
It makes sense. Trust me, it makes sense in that, and it's also a more thoughtful answer than I think just like, wow, he's back in this loop, like Memento, like Memento, or something where, because I always wonder my one picking hole at it is like, okay, like how many times do they keep getting him on the boat, on the ferry? Like, did they just keep him on the ferry until they're like, all right, he's ready. He doesn't know who the fuck he is now again.
I do. I think you get up. It's like a foggy day. You take him on. You dress him in the outfit. you take him on the ferry, right?
Mhm.
And then you just kind of like get out of sight distance of the island in the fog and just kind of cruise around a little bit.
That's
And eventually he'll come out of the bathroom kind of sweaty, and you'd be like, okay, we're good. We're good
he's
to
ready.
go.
He's ready.
He's
He's
ready.
ready. Give him back his wedding ring.
Yeah. Or better than that, it's the 50s and they don't know about CTE, so just Mark Ruffalo just conks him on the head with a blackjack every time.
Having it in blackjack too. Wow.
Just whap, just right across the back of the head. Drills him.
All right. He's ready.
He's good. When he comes to, he'll be good.
It'll be a little headache, but
That's why he's always like, he's like, oh, you having a migraine? It's like, no, man, this dude gave me a concussion.
oh, I'm a little slurry, but we didn't have any
I
shots.
did like the element of how like he's getting all twitchy and jittery, and he's like, oh, there's something in my food, there's something in my cigarettes, and Ben Kingsley's like, no, you're just off your meds.
Yeah, he's like, well, I haven't had a drink. He's like, yeah, no, you're addicted to opium, basically,
Yeah,
or whatever the
well, and
fuck's.
like, yeah, you're like, we've got you on like a basically like Thorazine, and you're like off of it now.
Mhm. And you've been on it for 2 years.
Yeah,
But talking about I like keep jumping around, and not really jumping around, but the whole ending reveal of the reality of events too, with the kids in the lake, and Michelle Williams is
that all definitely
so fucking sad.
is fully horror.
Well,
Like,
that's hard.
there's
The way
nothing more. Like, you cannot say that the sight of those children floating in that water is not a horror movie.
no, honestly, the way Michelle Williams talks
Yeah,
is we before the
it's
movie in it
really unsettling. Like,
in a silly sense, like before we record it, like we were talking about, the Evil Dead Rises, and it's like Michelle Williams is talking like a fucking deadite, like one of those deadites half the time in that thing.
yeah,
I'm just
but
like,
she looks like sweet Michelle
yeah,
Williams.
oh, it it is there's a bit of a chuckle too, of like the same year Leo has a movie with two movies with twists and turns by two, I mean, one's Martin Scorsese,
Auteur
auteur
filmmakers.
filmmakers, and like Christopher Nolan easily could have made this. David Fincher easily could have made Shutter Island. Um, but with these odd dream sequences of wives being insane and like disbanding, like Michelle Williams and Marion Cotillard, you could swap the two, like
It's
on a
true. There's a lot of similarities here. Yeah,
in an off like not paying attention trivia. If you asked me what your like the tweet was, like the you're now watching tweet with him holding and her
oh,
busting
yeah,
away,
yeah,
I'd be like, oh, Inception, and like move on.
yeah. Yeah, I
But
can see that absolutely. This is why Leo never dates anybody in their who makes it to their 30s. He knows the ladies that age, they go off the deep end. He can't.
he's like,
He's like, nah. Have you seen my movies?
I spoke to Patricia Clarkson once.
That was it was enough for
That
me.
was enough. Um, but no, it's such a fantastic movie. You
I
know,
really do think it's underrated. I really do. I wish
he,
it's one of those ones that I always like want to stand up for and be like, no, you got the wrong idea about this. I feel the same way about The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise.
oh,
It's so
don't get me
widely
started.
derided as a white savior movie when
Don't
like the whole point of the movie is that he's not a white savior.
don't get me fucking started, because
It's like somebody made the laziest joke about the title, and that became all anyone ever
it
says
should have,
about the movie.
at that point I'm like, wow, I wish they called it anything else so we don't have to hear that, because that movie in itself too. Just real quick, one of my friends who's a history professor, like, just a history buff, he goes, this is the most accurate portrayal of like those events in that world, like that you could have
Yeah.
done too. If there's no washing of off, like that is you got to take it with that. It's like when a cop tells you, oh, The Wire, yeah, that's really realistic from
That's the
all
real
ends.
shit. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, this is one for stand-up, and it's hard because like Scorsese is one of those things where like he's I mean, it's cliche, he's my favorite. Like he's the guy you fell in love with who made cinema, and like Fall too, and
Definitely like
he,
one of the best to ever do it, one of the greats of his generation. Like he
he's
can't, you know what I mean?
it's hard because it's that thing now where like you'll have people, and I mean we live on Twitter for the most part, but oh, there's no such thing as underrated, blah blah blah. No, there is. Like, I mean, it's this. After Hours is pretty popular these days, and
Silence is probably an underrated sports
Silence
face.
is more. more or less your Shutter Island, where it's this modern movie that like brilliance. Because I'm pretty sure like Shutter Island was more of the vein. It's a Cape Fear of like, oh, I do one, then you guys then let me do what I want to do. And like Wolf of Wall Street at the time, it was like Wolf of Wall. You know, he very much lived his
I
life.
feel like honestly, Shutter Island should have come out now in the era of prestige horror. You could have sold it as what it actually is,
You slapped the little.
rather than trying to like pretend it's like a horror movie. You could have sold it for what it actually was.
Oh, they slapped the today. They slapped. I wouldn't be A24. You slapped the little like
House or
whatever the Paramount like prestige one is, like their indie one. You know what I'm talking about?
is that the one that's got the Archer logo?
No,
Is that
no,
that
no.
one?
That's like art. I think it's called Artisan or something.
Oh,
No, there's a Paramount like vintage or some shit,
oh,
and
okay, all right.
they but you put that in front of it. You give it the little head nod here and there. They'd eat this shit up. It's he did his career for the most part, I believe, basically like after Raging Bull of area, like, oh, I do a movie you want me to do, then you let me do like he very much worked in the studio.
One for you, one for me, sure.
So Cape Fear, great movie. They were always good movies. One for the studio, then they let me make Casino or something like that, whatever came right after. Um, or maybe it was fucking Age of Innocence, because the one thing Scorsese wants to make is not the thing people think he wants to make.
Yeah.
Like Silence was a passion of a religious passion project.
Oh yeah. Well, he did get to a point, I would say, in the last. He like once we get into the 2000s, he's kind of only doing what he wants to do.
Yeah.
I think at that point, But you're definitely early in his career. You're 100% right.
Oh yeah, he like After Hours, great fucking movie. But that was I mean, that was I do one. I mean, Morgan Scorsese. This is just my Martin Scorsese rant at this point. He made The Color of Money, which was a fucking The Hustler sequel,
A
like
sequel to The Hustler. Yeah,
25 years later with Tom Cruise, which being cool. Like, it's good, but it's a paycheck.
Weird one for him.
But anyway, I'm really happy you picked this to get us rewatching it.
I didn't realize you weren't that familiar with it, so I'm glad.
No,
you went back to it because it's one of those ones that I've kind of always been on the bandwagon for. Like I didn't have to I just loved it from top to bottom. Like
no,
from the
you
first
know what?
minutes.
Last time I saw this was in 2013 or 14. And I did a whole art retrospective of Scorsese films for a big college project. And I watched, movies while I was doing it and read a bunch of shit and did a bunch of artwork around his movies and of him and blah, blah. It was a cool project. It was my favorite thing I did in college. But that was 100%. It's 100% the last time I watched this movie. But anyway, do you have any
I hope it makes it into your rotation sooner than that.
It's back.
It's a heavy watch though. It's one of those ones like we were talking about the 2013 Evil Dead and stuff. It's not one you can just throw on anytime because it does have some. It's heavy.
I think it's definitely a great too, and it'd come back to this of I know I think every movie person gets this question. Hey, I need something to watch, but I want a good movie that's maybe a think. I get that a lot from people. This is now going to shoot right up to. Well, have you watched Shutter Island recently, ever? My main one recently for horror recommendations for the last year has just been Autopsy of Jane Doe. It's on Tubi.
Oh yeah. That's a good one. Sure.
A little of the conversation last night. Anything you want to add to this, Brian? I mean, I know I'm pretty set.
No, I think we talked about, like I said, this is a great movie, great cast, a lot of fun. I not fun, but just like a good solid film. You know what I mean? Just like a good piece of cinema.
Yeah, no, it's what it is. It was a financial success and all of that. It is a forgotten gem of the 2010s.
Yeah, honestly, there aren't that many Scorsese movies that you haven't seen a bunch of times. Here's another one. You know what I mean? Like, I bet most even hardcore Scorsese heads, a lot of them haven't gone back to this one as often. I bet, there's a lot of
No.
people whose Goodfellas is their favorite movie who probably never even seen this. So.
Oh, or like the new Scorsese hot take that people have, which I think is a little lazy. I know we're wrapping it up. Is like overstanding the king of comedy.
Well, that's kind of the Joker thing, right?
Yeah, and like it's a good movie, but like give me Taxi Driver first, and then like
Sure.
King of Comedy is one of those ones where got a great performance out of De Niro, but it really falls apart by the end, and
Yeah.
but that's a conversation for a different day.
Hey, no director's infallible,
No, he is.
Everybody worked through some shit.
Yeah, unless you're James Cameron.
I mean, don't come for the king. It's hard to argue.
Because even though I make fun of those avatars and not for me, I can't call them bad.
No, well, and here's the thing: it's like most of the time, and I think the Flash bears this out. Like stuff that is undeserving, they will get humbled in the long run. And I think if James Cameron wasn't deserving, he wouldn't. You know what I mean? Like I don't think he would have made. I think these, like I said, they're not for me. But if $2 billion worth of people want to go see them, who am I to argue?
I saw it and I was like, oh yeah, it's cool.
But neither of us went and saw the Flash because we're good people.
Yeah, no, come on.
The least you can do is literally nothing. Just don't go.
Come on, man. No one's trying to watch the Flash. All right, man. You could find me at Shenango1 and on Flyover State of Fear, and this show on all platforms and everything else. And you could find Brian at Hercules, and we'll catch you soon. Bye. Welcome to Flyover State of Fear.